Tonight, in this deep dive, we are going to explore something that is incredibly private. I want you to picture the exact moment right before you check your bank balance. Just think about what happens in your actual body. Your thumb is hovering over the app on your phone, right? You're waiting for the Face ID to register, or maybe you are typing a password into your laptop.
Yeah, that fraction of a second.
Exactly. And in that one single second, before the screen even loads and the numbers appear, there is a sudden, subtle tightening in your chest. It happens right in the sternum.
Right, your breathing changes.
Yes, your breathing gets just a tiny bit shallower.
Yeah.
And the truly human thing here is that this physical reaction, this quiet, private weight, it happens regardless of whether you know the number on the screen is going to be high or low. It is literally a bracing for impact.
Well, because your body is reacting as if it is about to encounter a physical threat. I mean, even though you are just sitting in your living room looking at a piece of glass, your autonomic nervous system completely kicks in.
It's wild when you think about it like that.
It really is. We carry so much of our survival instinct, so much of our emotional history right into that one tiny digital interaction. It's an incredibly vulnerable place to be. And yet, we experience it in total isolation. We are completely alone in our living rooms or our cars, just silently absorbing that spike of adrenaline.
So our mission for this deep dive is to look at an exact private moment. And I want to be clear, the vibe for our conversation today is completely different from what you might expect when the topic involves finances.
Absolutely. No judgment here.
Right. There is no drama. There are no urgent questions we are trying to force you to answer. We're just going to create a safe conversational space because our goal is to unpack a stack of fascinating research from behavioral psychology to financial therapy frameworks so we can understand the unseen forces that dictate our financial lives. We aren't here to fix a budget. We aren't telling you where to invest. We are just here to understand the human being who is sitting behind the bank account.
Which, I mean, that is the piece that is almost always missing from the conversation. We treat money as if it is just math.
Right. Just numbers on a screen.
Yeah, but if it were just math, nobody would ever feel that tightening in their chest. The math is incredibly simple, addition, subtraction, but the human being is infinitely complex. And until we look at the human, the math is never actually going to make sense of the behavior.
So I want to paint a picture of that human complexity, because I think we need to ground this in a highly relatable scenario. Let's say it's 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. You are pulling your car into the driveway after a long, really exhausting day.
We all know that feeling.
Oh, intimately. So you put the car in park and you turn off the engine. And you can hear that quiet ticking sound the engine makes as it cools down. And in the passenger seat, or maybe, hidden in the back, there is a shopping bag. It's something you bought today. Maybe it's clothes, maybe it's a piece of tech, or honestly, maybe it's just something small for the house. And as you sit there in the quiet of the car, you make a conscious, deliberate choice. You decide to leave the bag in the trunk.
Yeah.
You tell yourself, I'll just bring it inside later when the house is quiet. Or maybe it's even smaller than that. Maybe you take the receipt out of your wallet and you quietly throw it away in the outside garbage can before you even walk through the front door.
Man, that is, in that moment, nobody's watching you. There is no grand confrontation waiting inside the house, but the internal friction in that car is absolutely deafening.
Right, so loud in your own head.
Exactly. You are managing a profound sense of psychological discomfort, and you are managing it through avoidance and secrecy. When we leave that bag in the trunk, it doesn't feel like a logistical choice about when to carry things inside. It feels heavy. It feels like a deeply personal moral failing, like a sign of dishonesty or a crack in our character.
And if you are listening to this and you have ever done something like that, if you've left the bag in the trunk or hidden the receipt or maybe downplayed what something cost when a partner asked, I want you to hear this statistic, because it fundamentally changes how we view that moment in the driveway.
This data point is huge.
It really is. According to the research, 40% of surveyed adults admit that they have actively lied to their spouses about the cost of a purchase.
40%.
Almost half the people walking around you at the grocery store. And another 40% feel it is completely okay not to share financial information with their partner at all.
So the clinical research refers to this phenomenon under the umbrella of money vigilance. It is this intense, watchful, secretive energy around our finances. But because money is such a taboo subject in our culture, we automatically assume we are the only ones who act this way.
We think we're the only ones hiding the bags.
Exactly. The shame thrives in that isolation.
Yeah.
We sit there and think, I am a successful, rational adult in every other area of my life. I manage projects at work, I raise children, I pay my taxes. So why am I sneaking a shopping bag into my own house like a teenager sneaking past curfew?
Right. We think we are uniquely broken. But, I mean, if nearly half of all adults are engaging in this exact same behavior, we really have to look at it differently. If 40% of people are doing it, it's not an individual anomaly. You are not experiencing a failure of discipline in your driveway.
No, not at all. You are executing a piece of programming. It is a systemic psychological pattern, one that is governed by an unseen set of rules that, honestly, you didn't even know you agreed to.
Okay, I want to pull on that thread. What exactly is the programming? Because we aren't just making a series of individual logical choices. What is actually running the show?
So behavioral researchers, specifically financial psychologist Brad Klontz, have actually given this programming a name. He calls them money scripts.
Money scripts, okay.
Yeah. Klontz defines money scripts as deeply held, highly unconscious beliefs about money that we develop in childhood. They are not, logical deductions we made as adults after reading an economics textbook.
Right.
They are the frameworks we use, the stories we construct to make sense of the role money plays in our families, in our life circumstances, and in the world at large.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's essentially like operating a smartphone, where you can never see the underlying operating system.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. You wake up every day and you think you're freely choosing which apps to click, which messages to send, when to budget, and when to splurge. You feel like you are in total control of the interface.
But you're not.
Exactly. The hidden code, like the iOS or Android operating system running in the dark background, is actually dictating every single swipe. It is managing the battery drain, deciding which notifications get pushed to the front of your screen, and quietly shutting down programs it deems a threat. So you think you are making a conscious adult choice to leave the bag in the trunk, but your operating system initiated that defense protocol before you even pulled into the driveway.
Precisely. The user, the conscious you, doesn't have access to the source code. I mean, a child doesn't understand inflation or interest rates or macroeconomic policy, but a child intimately understands the tension in their mother's jaw when she opens the mail at the kitchen table.
Wow. Yeah, they pick up on the physical cues.
Always. A child understands the sudden, heavy silence in the room when a certain topic comes up. From those fragmented, highly emotional experiences, the child writes a script to make a confusing, stressful world make sense.
So the script becomes the operating system.
Exactly. And the research highlights something vital about these money scripts. They are highly resistant to change.
Why is that? Why can't we just update the software when we get older and make more money?
Because they are forged in the fires of childhood anxiety or family stress. When a belief is tied to an emotionally charged event, it isn't just a thought anymore, it becomes a survival mechanism. Your brain essentially says, look, this script kept us safe, or at least kept us functioning, during a highly stressful time. We are not going to delete it just because we have a steady paycheck now.
That is so profound. If you are listening to this and you've spent years beating yourself up over your financial habits, wondering why you can't just stick to the budget or why you feel sick to your stomach when you spend money on yourself, I really want you to hear what the research is saying. You are not bad with money. You aren't lacking willpower or discipline.
No, you are dealing with legacy code.
Yes. You are running a survival script that was written when you were far too young to be programming your own life. And just giving it a name, just calling it a money script, begins the process of separating your identity from your behavior. You are not the script. You are the person holding the script.
I love that. And, if this conversation is resonating with you, if you are finding yourself nodding along or feeling a sudden sense of relief that you aren't the only one carrying this weight, we want to warmly invite you to subscribe to the Leone Patterns channel.
Yeah, and please leave a comment. This is a genuine invitation to join a community of people who are exploring the human side of money together. We want to ensure you never miss the next deep dive into these patterns. We are building a space where it is safe to talk about the things we usually hide in the trunk of the car.
Absolutely, because if we are going to talk about how deeply this programming goes, we have to look at how it literally alters the way our minds function in real time. We have to look at the hard science of cognitive bandwidth.
Wait, are you saying that our relationship with money actually changes our cognitive ability? Like it affects how smart or capable we are in a given moment?
Yes. I mean, literally, yes. There is a groundbreaking study by a researcher named Anandi Mani that measures exactly this. Mani and her team looked at the cognitive function of individuals around their paydays. And they didn't just ask people how stressed they felt. They measured their mental bandwidth using a psychological assessment called the Stroop test.
Break down how the Stroop test works, because the methodology here is what makes it so fascinating.
Okay, so the Stroop test measures cognitive flexibility and mental vitality. Imagine sitting in a sterile room looking at a screen. A word flashes on the screen. The word is R-E-D. R-E-D.
Okay, simple enough.
But the font is painted in a vibrant blue ink. Your brain's language center immediately screams R-E-D because reading is automatic for adults. But the rules of the test require you to suppress that automatic instinct, bypass the language center, and identify the color of the ink, which is blue.
I've tried these. It requires this weird fraction of a second of intense cognitive braking.
Exactly. It requires actual mental bandwidth to suppress the impulse and find the correct answer.
It's like asking your brain to pat its head and rub its stomach while running on a treadmill. It takes a surprising amount of effort.
A lot of effort. So in Mani's research, participants were given a test with 48 of these types of cognitive questions. The metric was simply the percentage of correct answers. And the researchers looked at how people performed on this exact same test at different times of the month. Specifically, they measured their cognitive performance based on their distance to payday.
So they took people who were days away from getting paid and people who had just gotten paid and compared how well they could hit the brakes in their brain.
Right.
What happened?
The research shows a literal, measurable drop in cognitive performance in the days before a payday. As the bank account dwindles, as the financial reality becomes tighter, the brain's ability to process information and suppress impulses significantly degrades.
Wow.
Yeah, the participants were objectively worse at the test when they were experiencing financial scarcity.
Wait, so it's not just that they were distracted or feeling stressed out. You were saying there is a literal drop in cognitive bandwidth.
Yes. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, scarcity triggers tunnel vision. When you are starving, your brain shuts down peripheral processing and focuses entirely on finding food. When you are experiencing financial scarcity, your brain is running a massive background process that is constantly calculating, worrying, and trying to figure out how to make it to the end of the week. That background process eats up your mental RAM.
It's like having too many tabs open on a web browser. The computer doesn't break, but everything slows to an absolute crawl because the processor is maxed out.
Precisely. You literally have less cognitive capacity available to make complex decisions, to be patient with your kids, to perform well at work, or, crucially, to make rational financial choices. Scarcity isn't just a bad feeling, it actively consumes the very cognitive bandwidth you need to escape the scarcity.
Which creates this devastating loop. When you have the least amount of money, you also have the least amount of cognitive bandwidth to make good decisions to get yourself out of that situation. You're essentially trying to solve a complex math problem while someone is blasting an air horn in your ear.
But the moment payday arrives, the air horn stops. The bandwidth is suddenly freed up again. Cognitive performance returns to normal.
Okay, but what happens when we do get the money? What happens when the scarcity ends? Because the cultural narrative we are always sold is that if we just get the promotion, if we just make more money, the stress will evaporate and we will finally be happy.
Right, the magical finish line.
Exactly. But that brings us to the second scientific concept in the research, which completely shatters that narrative.
You are talking about the hedonic treadmill, also known as hedonic adaptation. This is the psychological conjecture that humans quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness, like a baseline or a set point, despite major positive or negative life changes.
We all have this internal monologue. We tell ourselves, if I just pay off this car, if I just make $80,000 a year instead of 60, I will feel secure. I will have finally arrived. But the treadmill theory says we never actually arrive.
No, we don't. Researchers Frederick and Lowenstein classify the specific mechanisms behind why we never arrive. The first mechanism is called shifting adaptation levels.
How does that work?
Well, you get the raise, you feel a massive spike in happiness and relief, but very quickly you habituate to the larger salary. Your perception of what constitutes a neutral baseline shifts upward. Suddenly, $80,000 isn't wealth, it's just the new normal required to maintain your slightly upgraded lifestyle. You return to your exact same happiness set point, just with more expensive taste.
So it's the phenomenon of lifestyle creep, but it's happening on a neurological level.
Yes.
And the second mechanism they identify feels even more insidious.
Yeah, the second mechanism is desensitization. This means your neurochemical pathways actually become less sensitive to constant stimuli. Just as someone living in a noisy city eventually tunes out the sirens, the brain prevents persistently high levels of intense positive or negative feelings to protect its own equilibrium.
Hang on. Desensitization. Are you saying my brain is literally numbing itself to the fact that I make more money now than I did 5 years ago?
Yes, exactly. Your brain's dopamine receptors react to a new salary the exact same way they react to a highly caffeinated energy drink. The first time you drink it, you vibrate. You have limitless energy. But if you drink one every single day for a month, your receptors desensitize. Eventually, you need that energy drink just to feel normal, just to wake up. Your brain does the exact same thing with a higher income.
That is staggering. If our brain's neurochemistry literally shifts the goalposts through adaptation and physically desensitizes us to the new money we are making, does that mean the entire premise of, I'll be happy when I make X amount is biologically flawed?
It is a biological illusion. As money increases, expectations and desires rise in perfect tandem. Social theorist Greg Easterbrook refers to this phenomenon as abundance denial.
Abundance denial, that's a powerful phrase.
It really is. We construct elaborate, highly convincing rationales to consider ourselves deprived, even when we are objectively living in abundance compared to our past selves or historical standards. We literally deny our own abundance because our brain has desensitized us to it.
So we are just sprinting on a treadmill, exhausting ourselves, making more money, buying nicer things, and yet we remain in the exact same emotional location. The scenery around the treadmill changes, but the internal weather stays exactly the same.
Which is why understanding your money script is so incredibly vital. If your childhood script says, there is never enough, safety is an illusion, no amount of money will overwrite that script. The hedonic treadmill guarantees that the goalpost will always move and the script will always find a reason to feel terrified.
Okay, so if our brains are physically capping our happiness with this treadmill and our cognitive bandwidth is being hijacked by these childhood scripts, how does this actually show up when we're just trying to live our daily lives? Why do we keep doing things that make absolutely no financial sense?
To understand that, we have to look at the fundamental disconnect in how we approach financial behavior. In the clinical presentations we reviewed for financial therapy, they contrast two very different worldviews.
Okay.
Advice givers, so financial planners, well-meaning articles, logical friends, they treat money like a map. They say, if you want to get from point A to point B, just follow the solid blue line. Spend less than you earn, invest 10%. It is a perfectly straight line.
But clients, which is to say human beings, do not experience money as a clean map. For us, the map is drawn over an active minefield.
Yes, exactly.
The advice giver says, just walk in a straight line. But we know that if we step on the wrong memory or trigger the wrong childhood anxiety, the whole thing explodes.
And that minefield is often seeded with intergenerational trauma. The American Psychological Association notes that emotions and behaviors linked to terrifying or adverse historical events in a family's past are passed down through generations. You can inherit a financial trauma response just as surely as you inherit eye color or height.
Let's talk about a specific pattern here, because I think this makes it so real. One of the most common ones mentioned in the research is the compulsion to keep massive, completely illogical amounts of cash stuffed under a mattress or sitting in a zero-interest checking account. But rationally, everybody knows inflation needs cash.
Right.
You're telling me a fully educated adult with a smartphone who understands basic math is actively choosing to lose money to inflation because of something that happened to their grandfather in 1932. How does the brain justify that?
Well, the logic of the spreadsheet says, invest it so it grows. But the emotional legacy of the trauma says, institutions collapse, banks fail. If I cannot physically touch this money, it isn't real and they can take it from me.
Right.
The brain justifies it because a primal need for physical, tangible safety completely overrides the intellectual understanding of inflation. To that person, losing 2% a year to inflation is a perfectly acceptable tax to pay. It's to avoid the absolute terror of losing everything in a bank collapse they never even lived through, but absorbed through their family stories.
That makes complete sense when you frame it as a survival cost. And we see the exact same distortion on the complete opposite end of the spectrum with something called money dysmorphia.
Oh, yes. That's a huge one right now.
This is the pattern of overworking, hoarding wealth, and never ever feeling secure despite a highly verified high net worth. You could have millions in the bank, but because your brain's set point is calibrated to the fear of poverty, the feeling of safety is never allowed to land. Your self-worth becomes morbidly tied to your net worth. But the net worth is never, ever enough to soothe the internal wound.
Both the person hiding cash under the mattress and the multimillionaire working 80-hour weeks in sheer terror of losing it all, they are suffering from the exact same phenomenon, a script that overrides reality. The external numbers do not matter. The internal minefield dictates the behavior.
You might be meticulously balancing a spreadsheet today, but emotionally you are reacting to a financial panic your grandparents experienced 50 years ago. Your anxiety today is an echo of a room you were never even in.
That's beautifully put.
But, this sounds exhausting. If we are running on treadmills, fighting legacy code, and dodging inherited minefields, how do we understand this without constantly judging ourselves for failing to be perfectly rational?
This brings us to the most crucial shift in the research. We have to look at Albert Bandura's social learning theory. Bandura completely reframes how we view our quote-unquote bad habits. He posits that behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning.
Meaning we watch and we learn.
Exactly. Through the firing of mirror neurons in our brain as children, we absorb the behaviors, fears, and coping mechanisms of the adults around us.
So we didn't invent our financial anxiety out of thin air. We absorbed it.
Exactly. Your environmental factors and your personal history taught you these financial behaviors. Leaving the bag in the trunk, hiding the receipt, hoarding the cash. These are learned survival mechanisms. They were highly effective adaptations to an environment that required them.
They are not character defects.
No, not at all. They are evidence that you are a highly adaptable human being who learned how to survive in your specific emotional ecosystem.
So the behavior isn't a flaw, it's a fossil. It's proof of what you had to do to feel safe at one point in your life.
And realizing that is the catalyst for genuine change. In the financial therapy framework, they utilize Prochaska's stages of change to map out how people actually heal these patterns. Prochaska identified 6 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and termination.
And the transition between these stages is rarely smooth.
Yeah.
It is messy, it's humid. In pre-contemplation, you don't even know there's a problem. You just think everybody leaves shopping bags in the trunk.
Right, it's just normal to you.
But the transition to contemplation is usually triggered by a moment of internal friction. It's the moment your credit card gets declined at the grocery store, and you feel that hot flush of shame, and a tiny voice in your head says, maybe this anxiety isn't normal. Maybe this isn't how everyone lives.
That realization is terrifying, but it moves you into preparation, where you start gathering tools, reading articles, or listening to a deep dive like this one. Action is the messy process of actually modifying the behavior. Maintenance is holding the line. And termination is when the new behavior is so fully integrated that the old script is completely overwritten.
And the research states that the precursors to moving through those stages are perceived importance and perceived confidence. Just by sitting here, just by listening to this conversation with us today, you are already engaging in those precursors. You perceive that understanding your own behavior is important, and you are quietly building the confidence to look at your financial life safely. You are already in the process of change just by being curious.
To support that quiet curiosity, financial therapists rely on the work of psychologist Carl Rogers, specifically his concept of unconditional positive regard.
What does unconditional positive regard actually look like when we apply it to the messy reality of our own bank accounts?
It is a radical act. Unconditional positive regard means offering complete acceptance without conveying disapproving feelings, without judgment, and crucially, without immediately rushing to fix the person with advice. When therapists apply this, they find that the greatest indicator of behavior change isn't a better spreadsheet or a stricter budget. The greatest indicator of change is the relationship of trust between the therapist and the client.
And if you are doing this work on your own, the greatest indicator of change is the relationship of trust you build with yourself. You have to look at your own financial behaviors, the debt, the secretive spending, the avoidance of the bank app, with unconditional positive regard. You have to look at yourself and say, I see why you did that. It makes sense that you were scared. I see the minefield you were trying to navigate. I do not judge you for surviving.
It completely removes the hostility from the equation. It embraces a solution-focused mindset, which operates on a few incredibly freeing assumptions. Number 1, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Number 2, if it's not working, do something different. Notice it doesn't say do something perfect, just different.
Just a slight adjustment.
Right. And number 3, small steps lead to big changes. This financial behavior you are looking at is something to understand with deep, profound empathy. It is not an enemy to attack.
It just takes all the oxygen out of the panic. If we apply that grace to ourselves, we can start to pull this idea upward. We can start to connect our financial behavior to the broader, deeper human experience. Because we know that money is never just about money. It is always about something more human underneath.
It is entirely about what the money represents. Psychologists Goldberg and Lewis did extensive research on this, identifying that human beings are almost never just chasing paper or digital zeros. We use money as a proxy to fulfill four deep foundational psychological needs. Those needs are security, power, love, and freedom.
We become so indoctrinated by our culture with the idea that money is the ultimate goal, that having money is universally important, that we completely forget why we actually want it. We don't want the money itself. We want what we believe the money will synthesize in our bodies.
Exactly. Let's look at security. Someone chasing security isn't looking for a high account balance. They are desperately seeking the absolute relief of safety, the physiological calm of knowing the roof won't be taken away and the ground won't fall out from under them.
Or they are chasing power. And not, cartoonish villain power, but the ability to control their environment so they can't be hurt or marginalized again. Or they are chasing freedom, the ability to walk away from a toxic job, a bad relationship, or a situation that causes them pain.
Or, perhaps most profoundly, they are chasing love. The deep-seated belief that if they can provide enough, pay for enough, or appear successful enough, the people they cherish will not abandon them. When you look at your financial friction through the lens of security, power, love, and freedom, the math equation disappears entirely.
Shifting our attitude toward money doesn't mean becoming a cold, calculating economist. It means viewing money simply as a tool like a wrench or a hammer used to acquire basic needs and peacefulness. We have to detach it from our identity. It is not a symbol of our worth, our power, or our ability to be loved.
The friction we feel around money, that tightening in the chest before the app opens, the shame of the bag in the trunk, is ultimately a plea from our deeper selves to be seen and validated. It touches on how we relate to the people we love, how much we trust the world to hold us, and how we measure our own inherent worth in the quiet, lonely moments of the night.
It all comes back to the human being. We've covered a lot of ground today, so let's just take a moment to breathe and summarize the journey we've been on. No new information here, just a gentle look back. We started by looking at the quiet shame of money vigilance, the secrecy we carry in the driveway. We explored how the hedonic treadmill keeps us running, shifting the goalposts of our happiness that we never quite arrive, and desensitizing us to our own abundance.
We named the invisible forces in our lives as money scripts, the childhood operating systems that dictate our choices today.
And finally, we looked at how unconditional positive regard allows us to step off that stage, stop attacking ourselves, and simply understand that our money behaviors are just a search for love, safety, and freedom.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one quiet reflection. You don't have to act on this, just hold it in your mind. What if the persistent financial friction you feel isn't a sign that you need to work harder, or budget tighter, or discipline yourself more? What if that friction is just a gentle invitation to finally read the script you've been handed and realize that, as an adult, you now hold the pen and you can rewrite the ending?
If this conversation felt true for you, if something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one.
We're building a community here, people who think about money differently, not as a number to chase, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this, and we are genuinely glad you're here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.